We are 1 week away now from tying the record for longest government shutdown, which was 35 days. But it's actually the 32-day mark that's a lot more important. This Saturday, funding for SNAP for food stamps will run out, gone. 40 million nationwide use this benefit. About 1.5 million right here in North Carolina rely on it. The USDA has billions of dollars, we should say, in a contingency fund, but they won't use it. And now North Carolina is filing a lawsuit. Five on Your Side has been following this story from the beginning, so I spoke to WRAL's Keely Arthur about it. So, Keely, let's get started with this lawsuit and what it says. What is the Attorney General and all these Attorney Generals coming together to say?
Right. So 25 states, including North Carolina, suing the Trump administration, the USDA, and the Management and Budget Office, basically saying you have emergency funds, $6 billion worth of emergency funds. Please let us use that to pay for SNAP benefits. They're also saying that they want to be reimbursed if they use state funding. So if North Carolina had to use its own funding to keep people afloat in November, they want then the federal government, once the government's back open, to be able to reimburse them.
Makes sense. Emergency fund. Here we are in an emergency. What is the USDA saying? Why aren't they releasing this money?
Well, they're saying it's essentially not an emergency fund, or it's not the type of emergency that would be covered under this type of funding. They cited things like weather disasters, for tornadoes, for example, as a way to be able to use that type of money, but they're saying they can't do that in regards to the SNAP benefits. But that's kind of a reversal. In the end of September, when we knew this was all going to happen, the USDA was on the record saying that they had these emergency reserves. Now they're saying, oh, sorry, we can't use them for this.
So some states have started to think of creative ideas, ways to fill in the gaps if this money just isn't there. Is North Carolina setting some type of plan in place to make sure that families can get the food they need?
So I've been speaking with the State Department of Health about this for weeks, and every time I ask them, are there contingency plans? Is the state going to tap into their funding? They always say, we need federal funding to get SNAP up and running. So from the sound of it, the state hasn't figured anything out contingency plan wise, but we're asking those questions because places like Virginia, our neighbors to the north, have done that. They're using state funding, and the governor's words, Commonwealth funding, to keep SNAP afloat for Virginians.
So what do people in our state, what are we going to do? You know, I was thinking about the military folks in our area. Good news for them today. Vice President J.D. Vance saying that the people in the military will get paid despite the shutdown continuing. But we've also done so many stories on how people in the military community also heavily, some of them rely on these SNAP benefits. So get a bit of good news, but then a bit of bad news. What are these families, military or otherwise, going to do if they don't have access to that benefit?
Yeah, and I mean, it was a little personal. My husband, as you know, Dan, is in the military, and we were wondering if he was going to get paid. So it's been difficult, and we know that so many military families, just me speaking to friends that we have, are struggling because of this. You know, at this point, they're going to have to let something else fall by the wayside. So not paying phone bills, not having the internet, other things like that. So it's going to create a snowball effect for families that are already, as we know, struggling financially in North Carolina.
And so many of them, I imagine, will be turning to food banks. But we've been hearing from them as well, saying that, you know, food banks are amazing, what they do, the work that they do. But are they equipped to handle this type of influx and need so quickly?
Yeah, food banks sent out letters of support for this lawsuit saying, yes, we need you to tap into that $6 billion of emergency reserves because we cannot sustain feeding all those people. It's 1.4 million people a month in North Carolina rely on these benefits, thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids. So food banks, they are ready to help. They always have been, but they can't sustain this.
All right. Keely, thank you.